Yes, I know. Yeah, we have to do the music.
Hey, Maria.
Hey, Lisa.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you as well.
You know what that means?
Yes,
It's the Diversity
Duo.
Duo.
Woo!
Music plays. But it doesn't,
In our head.
But it doesn't really
No,
play.
that's great. You're so insane.
Oh, so Maria, today we have a very exciting guest. I first met our guest in the South Shore Leadership Cohort that I've talked about a few times, Ivana. That's where we met her first also. And I'm really excited. Today we talk a lot about supplier diversity. We talk a lot about procurement. Today we're going to move into the realm of neurodiversity and a little shout out to Disability In, because I don't think that we promote that as much as we should. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today too. I don't want to overdo the introduction. I just want to say, everybody, this is Maddie Gabor.
Hi, Maddie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for coming. This is
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. So my name's Maddie, obviously. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Betterment Works. We are a playful professional development company, which means that we do learning and development for adults at work using play as a primary modality. And also, I am a neurodivergent CEO. So yes, a chief executive officer with executive dysfunction. We love the humor. And my business partner is neurotypical.
Yep.
And so a lot of what we talk about is sort of how do we effectively work together, and how does that inform the kind of learning and development that we're putting out in other workplaces. And so I'm so excited to be here because you got to see one of our workshops, All Brains Welcome Neurodiversity at Work, and it's all about that subject.
Yeah, and that's really so just to give a little background. So Maddie and her partner had given an overview, or a full presentation, really.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
On some of the things that you do and talk about with some of your clients and your customers.
Yeah.
And I keep going back to what I learned that day. And I thought that was really one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because I want to hear more. And I don't know
Yeah.
if you can summarize for the audience and summarize for Maria. What was I'm sorry, the guy's name, the front of the brain had a name, the back of the brain had a name.
You're talking about amygdala, Adam, and
Yes.
prefrontal cortex, Pam.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. Yeah. We really love brain science, and I think it plays into how we run our programs. So I mentioned that we use play as our primary modality, and we do that because it's really engaging, really accessible, but also because it works really well with your brain, right? And because we are people who are trying to have impact, right? We're not here to check a box and be like, I did a disability workshop,
Right.
box checked.
Right.
Ableism cured. Like, that's not really the reality. So we're very interested in having a strong impact, which means we're very cognizant of how people learn. And I will say that part of that comes from my, what I would call autistic special interest in brain science and how brains work. And a lot of that comes from my own journey of figuring out my neurodiversity and really feeling quite acutely throughout my life that, my brain is different. Like, it feels different than the way that other people are interacting with each other and the world.
Yep.
And so in the process of really sorting that out personally, I came to love how brains work and how we learn and how we get better and how we process and prioritize information. And that informs all of our work, but also, I think, elevates the impact, because we want you leaving thinking about what we talked about.
Right.
And in a way that feels low risk, joy centered, but also I'm asking myself questions, and that's what we're looking for.
Well, I think and I have so many questions, but one of the things that I think happened was you made me think through a different lens.
Yeah.
Right? So there were certainly ways that I'm a little bit different than the next girl. And So I want to start with a compliment first, and it's not empty. But the idea that you knew there was something different about you,
Yeah.
and you didn't internalize it. It didn't become of shame. It didn't become kind of. It didn't become crippling to
Yeah.
how you moved in the world. And instead, you grabbed it by the horns and you said, I'm different. I wonder why.
Yeah.
And that led into everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you. I would love to pretend that there were not some like valleys in that journey. Because, I grew up in the South.
Mm.
I am Jewish, neurodivergent, and queer. So there was something different about me.
Any other boxes? Should we check any other boxes?
Yeah, exactly. and so I think part of it was also sort of sussing that out in terms of identity of there were lots of things different about me. And it was hard to know where one part of that begins and the other part begins and ends. And so now I do feel like there's such joy in the radical self-acceptance of who you are. And that process will, when you play with your identity in that way and you engage in it in a joy-centered way, you do find your purpose.
Right.
And then you do find your impact also. And it's easier to walk in both of those things when you have that lovely self-acceptance. But getting there, it's a journey.
Yeah.
It takes.
I didn't mean to imply you
of
woke up
course
one day and was
not.
like, oh, my life is great.
Oh my gosh!
But,
No, not at all. But
Yeah.
it is. When you run towards yourself, it's a little bit easier.
I like that.
So, Maddie, I've been reading lately. I found this incredible article. I think it was in the one of the medicine journals about women in the age range of 42, whatever, being mostly diagnosed with attention deficit and anything else that falls under that.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, because I have seen some signs after reading, I'm like, oh, that sounds like me. Oh my goodness. I mean, I had a very tough time in school being still. And when I was growing up in Puerto Rico, teachers had every right to hate you.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me. I used to go home black and blue. And because I couldn't sit still.
Mm-hmm.
But everything that, I always had very high grades. I was very respectful. I just couldn't sit still. Daydreaming a lot while the teacher was talking.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching the little birds flying around.
Mm-hmm.
And now, looking into all that, I'm like, oh, yes, people, yes. I have a new diagnosis.
Yeah.
So why do you think that women are being diagnosed so late and boys from the very young age, they get diagnosed while they're still toddlers?
Yeah, I think a few things. So for starters, our medical system is going to reflect the natural biases that already exist in our country, right? I'm always surprised to learn that we didn't do prescription drug trials on women until the mid 90s.
Right.
Wow.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that all of our information was built off of male bodies. And so on some level, if we already know, and the data is quite clear, that women and people of color are underserved or improperly served through our medical systems, of course that is going to show up on the diagnostic level for young girls. I also think that because autism, ADHD, these things on the neurodiversity spectrum the symptoms are behavioral. That means that other parts of your identity inform the way that it shows up. So, really hyperactive boys are like, oh, you're just hyperactive. Really hyperactive girls are, you're a bad listener. Similarly, one of the things that I did a lot of playing with my hair as a stimming thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this element of well, that's just what little girls do. And so behaviors that in boys will be clocked as oh, you should ask a doctor. In girls, they're either not clocked at all or they're punished as a personal failing. Right? Because girls are not given the same breadth of opportunity to misbehave when they're young.
Right.
And so I do think that, we see girls not getting diagnosed. And then what happens is when you get older and you start engaging in the world and you are still struggling, you're still feeling like, wow, I'm like so burnt out at the end of every week. I can't manage to prioritize things at work. I'm missing big appointments because I like crashed out and slept through them, or I got too focused on some niche project that I actually don't need to be doing, you know? And those kinds of things, once you're old enough to ask yourself these questions and then seek resources, that's why we are seeing the 40 plus age range for women being the largest new population of neurodiverse diagnoses.
Interesting.
And, you know, I think it speaks to a failing for little girls.
Yep.
Because the problem with, I know there's a lot of stigma around diagnosis. There's a lot of reason not to seek that and not to disclose. But also, when you are young, that is the only way to get support.
That is very true.
And so if you don't get diagnosed, you don't get support. And like, amazing that you were able to make it through school. I worry about people who are not making it through school because of these things.
You know, it was a combination of fear of my parents.
Me too. Me too.
And the teachers.
Yeah.
But, you know, there were classes that I truly, truly enjoy, and my attention was so hyper-focused.
Yep.
But then there were classes that I'm like, God, kill me. Oh, look at a bird. Oh, look at me. Oh, my God. So way back then, you know, they didn't have, I'm talking, you know, 70s. There was nothing near a diagnosis such as that.
No.
They always told me that, you know, I'm not a good listener and I'm rebellious.
Yeah.
Because
you're too impulsive.
Even when they put me in the corner, I will be doing a little dance. And all the students will be laughing and I will get penalized for that. I can't stand, till this day, I cannot sit still.
Me neither.
I tried.
I'm always, one of the things I talk about in that workshop is stimming, moving around. Because basically what that is it's your brain and your body trying to find stasis so that you can actually engage properly in the world around you. And when I am sitting still and I have to sit still, I'm spending about 25% of my overall energy on remaining still, which means that that's 25% I'm not spending thinking about what you're saying or engaging in the conversation or focusing on what's in front of me.
Right.
And so actually, if I'm allowed to move around a little bit, I can be more engaged in the world. But instead, we oftentimes punish people for that, or we say, like, what are you trying to get attention or distract people? And it's really tough because actually what's happening is people are like, I'm just trying to live. Like, I'm just trying to be in this world.
Right.
You know, when I go to big meetings and conferences, I'm the one that sits always
All the way
in the back.
Yes.
And I tell people, don't take this as a sign that I'm not interested in what you have to say. It's that I move a lot. I have to. Otherwise, I'll fall asleep.
Yeah.
So I move a lot.
Yeah.
So,
and actually, it's helping you learn from what's being told to you. And that's the thing that's so heartbreaking is that actually this is you trying to engage in good faith, and sometimes it's interpreted as something else, and that is rough because it creates a really unfriendly world for people who don't exist in the ways that we are told you have to exist.
you know, and I also, I'm at that point in my age that I really don't give a nice. I'm gonna be nice. I really don't care much what people think about me. If I want to sit in the back, look, I have earned the right to sit in the back. And I'm going to sit in the back.
Absolutely.
No explanation needed, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things I love is what you're playing with right now in your hands. So you have this mechanism is taking some of your attention. You called the word stimming.
Yeah.
Is that right? And this allows you to be focused more than your 75%.
Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit about other mechanisms and means in which?
Well, what's interesting about stimming is that, so like I'm using a tool because I have embraced this truth about myself where it's like, oh, this is actually really helpful to me. One of the things we notice is that a lot of times people are stimming and they don't realize it. So like knee bouncers, okay, that's stimming. Have you ever met people who clear their throat a lot or crack their knuckles a lot?
Oh, okay.
Right? Okay. So these are actual stims that you're already doing.
Okay.
But to people, they just feel like natural, like, oh, this is just like what I do with my body. And you know, these repeated physical motions again, you're trying to find like a sensory neutrality, because what's happening with a lot of neurodiverse people is that they suffer from either sensory understimulation or overstimulation. And stimming is one of the tools in your toolbox that you can use to find a neutral place so that you feel good and can actually listen and engage and speak and pay attention.
So I don't know the difference between those two. Could you?
The difference between what?
Being understimulated.
Sure. So one of the examples I use is clothing. Okay. And I love an outfit. I care a lot about aesthetics, if I'm being honest. And also, I have some very specific sensory needs when it comes to the sense of touch. So I mentioned earlier that I don't wear any rings. You may notice that I don't have acrylics on. And I am a girl who loves aesthetics and loves an outfit and should be really into accessorizing, but I experience sensory overstimulation when things are on my hands. And I can't focus on anything else if there are things on my hands. I experience sensory understimulation when I can't feel my clothing. So I wear tights every day, right? Because I need to feel my clothing. Sometimes you'll see little kids having like a total meltdown and you'll be like, what is going on here? And it's because they have a tag in the back of their sweater. And a neurotypical child can ignore the little scratchy feeling. A neurodiverse child probably cannot, but they also can't necessarily articulate what's bothering them so much. And so that's for sense of touch. All of our senses have capacity for over and under stimulation. I feel very uncomfortable in complete silence. Silence creeps me out. It creates a sense of hypervigilance in my brain, which is an adaptive response, and so that's sort of normal, but silence it's too quiet. Similarly, I can't have too many competing sounds because that's overstimulation. And then I, will be like in a big group and I'll turn to my friend and I'll be like, I have to leave. I have to go.
Right.
And I'll have like a look of utter panic on my face. And then it's as simple as like, oh, I got to a quieter space. Like, I'm totally fine. I'm completely fine.
That explains. I don't own a single article of clothes that has a label. They're all, the first thing is the first thing I do, remove all labeling. I can't stand it.
It's such a real thing.
It is a real thing.
A lot of times I joke that my favorite question to ask other autistic people is, are you a no socks autistic or a socks all the time autistic? Or the secret third category, which is, I wear socks, but here's the 7-step process I go through to make that bearable for me.
Wow.
And it's things like I cut the seam out and I turn things inside out. And very similar to what you're talking about of like the label is the first thing to go.
The labels go.
That's a sensory input thing.
So you talked about your response being when overstimulated, get out of that scenario, right? So in that presentation that you had given, you also talked about, so you spoke of fight or flight, which is something I think we all know. And to me, that would be the end of the conversation right there until you taught me there are additions.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about it? Because I think those are so compelling.
Brain science? Of course. I'm so excited. So this is something that I talk about whenever there's any conversation about diversity, inclusion, emotion, interpersonal skills. I think it's really important to have a clear understanding of all of the ways that your brain functions, right? So the amygdala, which is like the back part of your brain, and also amygdala Adam. And so the in general, the back parts of your brain are the oldest parts of your brain, right? Those are the things that are most aligned with the previous versions of humans, right? The front parts of your brain are the newest parts of your brain. Those are the most advanced parts. So your amygdala is the part that senses threat. And it's pretty basic, right? It's kind of an on-off switch. It's sort of like threat, yes, threat, no. And when you sense threat, yes, we all know about fight or flight, but people don't talk about the other ones. Fawn, freeze, and flood. And those are the ones that, there are others, but those are other common ones. So freezing is really simple. It's exactly what it sounds like. You're sort of paralyzed. You can't move. Again, we see this in animals.
Right.
Possums.
Yeah, right.
They're big
Deers.
Yeah.
where they're like, maybe if I don't move, no one will notice me.
No one will see me.
Yeah,
the,
like
the bunny in my
T-Rex.
backyard
Yeah.
pretends like the dogs aren't coming
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
to race it. And it's like every day I
Yeah.
say, why aren't you moving?
Yeah,
Because it's
exactly.
frozen.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
freeze is one. Fawning is one that's a little bit more complicated, which is where you sort of buddy up to your aggressor in an attempt to not be the focus of their aggression. So you see this in a lot of domestic violence, honestly, but also other just unhealthy and abusive
Child
dynamics.
Right.
A lot of
Right?
child abuse.
Yeah, yes, where you desperately don't want to be the focus of their ire, and so you would rather fawn. And then flood is the one that I think is the most overlooked and needs to be talked about the most, because this is the one. All of these are not things that you have control over. Like the way your brain processes this, that's your brain just behaving.
Yep.
And flooding is when your brain floods with chemicals. And usually those are things like cortisol and adrenaline. These are your stress hormones. And they are also neurotransmitters, which means they are communicating with the rest of your body. So basically what they're saying is like, it's time to freak out. You should probably get really sweaty, or cry.
Yeah.
Or also there's some other biological things like the blood flows from your insides to your limbs because it's preparing you for running or fighting, right? And your brain is doing all of that without your consent, right? So like
It takes over.
yeah,
It just
and the
takes
thing
over.
is your amygdala is like not very evolved.
Right.
And so, sometimes that threat defense mechanism gets triggered from all sorts of things. Like somebody could be wielding a chainsaw, sure, that's scary. But you could also be like in a really complicated social situation. And your brain, because threats are more than physical threats, there's psychological threats, there's necessity threats, right? The feeling you don't have what you need.
Yeah.
There's the threat of straying from the social norm,
Yeah.
right? Ostracization, all of those things. The amygdala is not like deciphering which is which. And so those things are happening no matter what. And when your brain floods with chemicals, one of the things it can do is that you cry because your brain is trying to get those chemicals out. And so the tears that you cry from emotion have a different chemical breakdown than the tears that you cry from like wind or allergy. And it's because the brain is trying to say, okay, there's too many chemicals.
Get
this
'em
is
out.
uncomfortable. Get them out. How about your eyeballs? And I think that's a really cool thing that brains do.
Really cool.
Also, justice for criers, because really you just have a very good brain. That's awesome. And so, and that's one of the hardest things about being a human, right? Is that reality of like, there are all the things I know I don't know. And then there's the whole realm of things that I have no idea that I don't know. And that, like, I can't conceptualize those things because I don't know about them.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think my take on this, and genuinely with a lot of issues of diversity, is, if you are in good faith trying to build your understanding, then you need to be leading with curiosity rather than judgment.
I like that.
That's right.
I
Right?
love that.
Because
Yes.
curiosity is, I would say, neutral to positive, and judgment is neutral to negative.
That's right. That's right.
And the thing is that curiosity is something we are born with, right? It's innately human, and we can recognize that in one another in a way that is compassionate and generous and empathetic.
Right.
Nobody wants to feel judged.
Right.
No.
Anyone who's been on the receiving end of judgment, especially when it's something about you, about your identity that like you can't control, right? It's just who you are.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want to, like, I don't want to change who I am, you know? But nobody wants to be on the receiving end of judgment. But when people are genuinely coming from a place of I want to better understand you
Yes.
and others,
Yes.
you can tell when their curiosity comes from that place versus a judgment place.
Yes.
You can hear it in the tone of voice and the words they choose, where you're like, oh, this is in good faith. And then on the other side, you're like,
Yeah, that was not
This
good
is not-
faith.
this is not.
So it's not what you say, but how you say it that counts.
Yeah.
Because if,
Well,
if
a little
Lisa
what you
says
say
to me,
also.
Maria, tell me about, why are you this way, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to listen to her tone of voice and whether
Yeah.
or not she's looking at me or her eyes are going left and
Yep.
right. And
And like, what is her
depending-
face doing?
if she were to ask those type of questions,
Yeah.
I would look at her face and to read her body language, and I will determine whether she's being mean or she truly cares about
Yeah.
my answer, and then I will give her the appropriate response.
Yeah, but I want to caution you on that because those social cues that we get from people's faces, those are not universal. They're
Right.
not globally universal.
Mhm.
But also for neurodivergent people, you maybe aren't getting the clarity that you're looking for. In particular, things like eye contact.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right? I think a lot of times we associate eye contact with respect of like, I know you're listening to me. And that's not always something that neurodiverse people are capable of giving, but they're not trying to imply disrespect. And
Yeah.
so that's what you're so right that how you say things matters,
Yeah.
but also we have to, again, sort of curiosity based, joyfully ask ourselves
Yeah.
questions about that because also it's not global, right? Other people from other countries, they're not going to look you in the eye.
I was going to jump in and
And-
say, when I was in high school, that was my first year, came to this country in 1979. And I was, we arrived in January. By March, February, I was already in school. And I had this teacher. I know that, hopefully she's still alive, Miss Camp. And she was,
full name in her. All
Yeah.
right.
Miss Camp.
Yeah.
And she was teaching us how to type. So I understood enough English. I couldn't speak it as
Yeah.
well, but I understood. So I kept on making the same mistakes. And she comes in and she's screaming at me. So she says, stand up. So I'm standing up and I'm like this, right? With my head bowed and my hands like this in front of me. And she goes, look at me. My culture, you don't look at your elders when they're screaming at you.
Yeah.
In the Latino culture, you look at the floor.
Yeah, because it's defiant.
That is respect. That's how we
Yes.
show respect.
Right.
Yes.
So she's screaming at me to look at her, and I couldn't. So there was another teacher, Mr. Blanco, I love you. he's walking by, and he turns around. He says, Miss Cam, she's showing you respect. That's a part of our culture.
Yeah.
She had this horrifying look, and she goes, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, oh, okay. And Mr. Blanco translated for me. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. I'm sorry. I didn't understand where you were coming
Yeah.
from either.
Exactly.
Right.
That, I have carried that with me. I was 15 at the time. I have carried that with me until today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
Because
think
that stuff stays with
it
us.
sure
Yes.
does. I don't think I realized for me when people tell me things, how I process it happens at 1 or 3.
Yeah.
Right, or 11 or 1,
Yeah.
right? I have to look up to the clock of 11 or I look up to the clock of 1
Yep.
because that's where the solutions, that's what connects all the
Siri,
dots.
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's I can't look at you if I'm thinking too deeply. I need to think about what you said.
That's amazing.
Yes.
And then
Or if I'm looking at you, I'm forcing myself
That's
because I
right.
know that is the societal
That's right.
expectation.
Right, right.
That's
You know?
right. You said something else. So I have this thing with my wife where she called me a know-it-all. I know that's surprising to everybody. but to me, in my head, I know everything. And here, please hear the whole thing out. I am 100% correct on what I say until you tell me different.
Mm.
And the difference, because if I were to be fearful of not being right, I certainly wouldn't be on a podcast. I wouldn't probably be able to get out of bed because I'd be so consumed with not being right all the time.
That's true.
Where I'm
Yeah.
so comfortable being wrong that I can comfortably walk through the world being right.
Yeah.
And when you say you don't know something, now I'm going to go back to my 11 or 1 and I'm going to think about it and say, that's how it fits. I know that sounds crazy,
Yeah.
but that's just,
Yeah.
it's,
Now, Lisa and I, we've been friends for a long time. And recently, I think it was back in January, we're having a conversation. And I'm stating my opinions about something that was coming down from the state. And she looked at me, square to my face, and she goes, I don't think I agree with that. And I said, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you the facts, and then you let me know. And we had this conversation, like, even though we're in disagreement, we were communicating in such a way that I wish more people would do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It shows respect.
Yep.
It shows that we want to learn from each other. And a couple of days later, she comes back to me. She goes, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know what? I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, and I wish, I mean, this is something like outside of neurodivergence, right? My company does a lot about how to have better work environments, and we end up talking about how do we disagree healthfully,
Right.
productively,
Yep.
and it does come back to that brain science
Yeah.
thing, and people really don't think about it. But what that says to me and what you're describing is that like you two have cultivated enough trust in your relationship
We have.
that you can speak clearly and say, I don't think I agree
And
with
openly,
you, and you are not feeling that as a threat.
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Whereas you
Yeah.
know there are other people in this
Yeah.
world that they
Yeah.
would say that to you, and you'd be like,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
right.
like you're like, okay, you
Yeah.
ting to start?
That's right.
You know,
You
so
know,
you're
my
trying to
response-
start.
my
Is that what's
response
happening?
is, I'm gonna walk away from this conversation
Yeah.
because it's not productive,
Yeah.
and I want to keep you as a friend.
Yeah,
and I just walk away.
100%.
I do walk away.
And that's a healthy coping mechanism
Yeah.
because you can't control your feelings, but you can control your behavior.
Mm.
And
Right.
the best leaders that I know are people that are super practiced in the space between your feelings and your behaviors. Right?
Yeah. So we also have an ability to say to each other, all right, I'm going to not mince my words,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yes.
Because I need to ask a question.
Yeah.
I need the answer to this. I need an answer to this question.
Yeah.
I can't put too much time and effort into
Yeah.
and we bring a lot to each other, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're culturally different. I'm a lesbian. She's straight. I don't hold it against her, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But
I do.
right, but it's that same thing, like
Yes.
something, and we had that recently where something was said. It was like whoa,
Yes.
whoa, and
Yeah.
she said, "Wait, is that?"
And I
said,
apologize. I'm like, I didn't mean it like
Yeah,
that. I'm
and
truly
Yeah,
sorry. But I
yeah.
was
But
feeling
it's n-
comfortable with her.
Right,
That's why I
yeah.
just,
Yes, and it's never in this.
Yeah.
It's never about the apology. It's
No.
about we need freedom to understand, so that we have the freedom to. Ooh, sorry about that. We need the freedom to understand, so that we have the freedom to do this comfortably
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and not hang our dirty laundry
No.
each week,
Or
right?
carry so much baggage.
Oh,
There's
God,
no
when
yes.
you don't
yes.
when you don't when you're not practiced in disagreement, what that means to me is that you are not practiced in resolution.
Right.
Mm.
And the thing about resolution is that it's not the same thing as getting exactly what you want.
That's correct.
Right?
Yep.
But it does involve being heard.
There you go.
And if you cannot get resolution, you are carrying that baggage into the next interaction that you have.
Yep.
And for every conflict that you have where you are not getting resolution, you're adding to that baggage. And then every conversation you have, both of you are dreading.
Yep.
And you're waiting for a fight.
Yeah.
You've been ruminating on it because you're still carrying it around.
Right.
You're
right.
you're having fights in your head of like, oh, I should have said this.
Yep.
You know, and then you go in and oh, what a self-fulfilling prophecy. All of a sudden it's a fight.
Right.
And it's because both y'all, can carry baggage, and then you're not practiced. You can become really entrenched in being sort of adversarial with people.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that scares me a lot about the discourse that's happening right now is that there's not a lot of room for curiosity. There's
Mhm.
not a
Yes.
lot of room for genuine human growth and learning.
Correct.
Uh,
That would require self-reflection.
but it also requires safety. People don't learn when they feel attacked.
That
That's
is
just
true.
a reality.
That
Yes.
is very
and
true.
and like that's why we utilize play
Yes.
as our modality, because
Love
it
that.
is such an innately human, joyful, engaging, accessible thing. We lower the temperature, and when you lower the temperature, you can have hard conversations. And when you create the sort of genuine human connection that comes with playing with each other, you end up being able to feel safe enough to ask questions and have them interpreted as curiosity rather than judgment. And I don't know how we're going to get through this if we can't talk to each other
Right.
and have hard conversations and learn from each other. Like, what else are we going to do?
Well, we're going to start a podcast.
Okay, good
And
plan.
we're going to talk about it. And you're
Good
going to have
plan.
this
And you're gonna be
amazing
the guest.
Okay.
and you're going to have this amazing company. And I want to,
Yeah.
if we could spend, let's move to your company a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yes, please.
So, who do you present yourself to?
Yeah, so
what size are they? What industry are they
Yeah.
in? Fill in all the
I
blanks. for
love
us.
that. So we work with all workplaces. And I know that's challenging, and we've had lots of business people being like, you need to narrow your market. And, maybe. But because we use a tool that is so human and accessible, and because we are interested in having impact, which is helping people build practices and have tools that move them from where they are to where they want to be, which is sort of a universal state, right? Everyone can be better in
Yep.
some way, and that's what we are about. And so we work with all workplaces, and sometimes that means it's a virtual workshop that has 500 people on it.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes it's a small in-person gathering of 10 leaders. And we work with organizations that do a million different things. So we strangely work with a lot of lawyers. We did not pursue this as a market niche, but I do think since we're working on having healthier workplaces, a lot of law firms are not healthy workplaces.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of interest in making that better. We also work with a lot of nonprofits, but we have also done programs with construction companies and any number of like engineers or tech people. And I think, what we're trying to put into this world is that we spend a third of our life at work.
Right.
And we want people to feel better, to connect better, and to do better. Because if you're going to be there, let's have it not be dreadful. Let's have it not be miserable. And I think so many people know what it's like to wake up and dread your job.
Oh, God,
Yeah.
yes.
I think
Yeah.
if you've had any amount of
Yeah.
time in the workforce, everybody has had like a boss that you hate.
Yeah.
Or just a working situation that does not work for you.
That's right.
And listen, some people have a lot more mobility and are able to change their job if they are miserable. That's not a reality for a lot of people. So what can we do to help make your workplace better? And that looks like a lot of things, but if you start from a place of everyone can be better, all organizations can be better, we can understand each other better, we can support each other better. How do we do that? And it doesn't have to be big and scary, and it doesn't have to be like, yeah, I'm going to unpack my childhood trauma at my 9 to 5. Like, we're not looking for that.
No.
We
no.
want to joyfully engage with one another so that we can see each other as holistic beings.
Nice.
Because when we do that, it's a lot easier to get through disagreement and conflict or insecurity or the basicness of like needing to be productive together and get things done. When you can see each other holistically, that's just a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so we work with everyone, and we offer all kinds of workshops and trainings that are geared towards better work environments. So sometimes that's things like soft skills, navigating difficult conversations, feedback. Sometimes it's wellness subjects, burnout, productivity. Sometimes it's DEI subjects, so neurodiversity, intergenerational workplaces is a thing we've been talking about a lot lately.
And there's a lot of places
There's
like that.
That's a big one.
Yes, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Actually, I have several questions, but listening to what you offer, what your company offers,
Yeah.
have you thought of reaching out to schools? Because I'll tell you why. And if you have, bravo. There's a lot of kids that will be able to identify there's something wrong with me. I don't know what it is. My parents get. And
Yeah.
by you talking about all these different topics, these kids will be like, okay, now I know. Now I know.
It's actually so funny you say that. So my business partner and I, we come from working with children. So I've been using play as a teaching tool since probably about 2007, 2008,
Wow.
when I was involved with a university group that used play to teach nonviolent conflict resolution at schools. And then I worked for a company that taught STEM education through play.
Wow.
So trying to get kids interested in science, math, engineering. And that is where I met my business partner. And we met because one day we were tasked with, we need to get more girls involved in our program. How do we get little girls to want to be engineers? And also, how do we acknowledge and address the disparity that our programs are mostly filled with little boys?
Right.
And we met staying up until 4 a.m. at an annual retreat, working on a workshop that was built towards addressing this problem. How do we speak honestly about this as an issue, and what do we do about it? And so we used to work with kids. In that organization, that's when we started working with adults. And actually, we came to realize, like, oh, we really like to think we're grown and that we're like so much more advanced than children. And I have to tell you, we are not.
Right.
Most things that hold true for how you can help a child learn also hold true for how you help an adult learn. It may look different or present different, but the baseline things are true across age ranges. And so we used to work with students, and then full circle moment in many ways, another Leadership South Shore person, Judy Vina from Specialized Career Guidance, who's lovely and wonderful, invited me to do a workshop about joy-centered leadership and how you can use that as a career compass for a program she was doing with students.
Wow.
That was a really cool workforce pipeline program.
Wow.
And so I actually got to work with students, again, older students, so seniors, 18-year-olds,
Yeah.
for the first time since working with them at that previous company a few weeks ago. And it was that full circle moment.
Wow.
Because often we're talking to adults who have made a lot of choices about their career, and then we'll have these workshops, and sometimes we have people coming away from them, this is not our intention, but being like, oh, I have to quit my job. Like, I'm now realizing I hate it.
I'm so miserable.
That wasn't the intention.
That wasn't the intention, but ultimately good.
Right.
Yeah,
Right?
right,
Because
right,
if you
right.
are
Yeah.
playfully engaging with the big questions of what do I like? What am I good at? What kind of impact do I want to have?
Yep.
Right.
You will clock that misalignment pretty quickly.
Right.
And then, good, you should leave. You should have a life that is joy-centered and that follows your passions. And also, I know businesses don't agree with this, but you don't want people working for you that don't want to work
Don't
for
wanna
you.
work there. That's right.
Like, that is a bad
is so
business
true.
move.
It is. It
And
is.
so actually when people quit because it doesn't work for them, like that's them doing you a
that's a
favor.
gift. That's
There
right.
you
That's
go.
right.
There
And
you
so
go.
it was really lovely to work with these students before they were in their careers.
Right.
So we could have those conversations because we talk a lot about things like, how did you used to play as a child? What did you love about that? Was it that it was outside? Was it that you were on a team? Did you produce something at the end? Was it solitary? Were there cool outfits? Why did you love that? What can you take from that as a statement about who you are and what you're looking for in this world? And how can you use that to guide your career?
Right.
And that's a way
Ah.
easier conversation to have with 18-year-olds than it is to have
With
with
35-year-olds.
35-year-olds. Who are like, oh no,
Absolutely.
what have I
Absolutely.
done? I am miserable.
My other question was related to the small business community.
Yeah.
What advice do you give to small business owners that happen to be under the spectrum of neurodiverse? I have a lot of clients that when I'm talking to them, they very shy, or they won't look at your face, or you can see that as they're trying to tell you what it is that they sell, whether it's a good or services, they're so not sure. So I tell them, and I said, we have to work on this because right now, I don't think anybody's going to buy what you're selling. You have to, you have to speak with confidence, and this is something you develop over time.
Sure.
You know, you're not born with it. Very few people are born with full confidence. I have I haven't met one yet. So,
Well, you've met one.
oh yes, I'm sorry, world.
I was
Lisa
pretty
was
confident,
gay.
child.
Lisa was gay.
I'm
So
sorry,
what
you've
a-
met two.
What
Yeah.
advice you have to
Yeah.
for small businesses
Yeah.
that are on that, on that spectrum?
So, one thing I will say is that as far as advice goes, I sort of adhere to a universal design theory, which is around disability advocacy. And basically, it means that whatever accommodations you are giving for a person who needs accommodations will also be helpful for people who don't.
I see.
And so I'm going to say that whatever advice that I am giving for neurodiverse people is also for neurotypical people, because actually the advice is the same.
Okay.
So I guess it's, two things. The first is know your values, because you want to talk about where confidence comes from. Not every situation is going to go the way you want it to. Not everything is going to land how you want it to. And dealing with that, dealing with times that things aren't going the way you want them to, or your business is not thriving, the thing that gets you through that is being confident that you made good choices, that you made the best choices you could make with the situation and circumstance that was in front of you. And the way that you feel about like making good choices, that comes from knowing your values, right? What do I stand for? What am I trying to put into this world? What kind of impact do I have? Not just what are my intentions, what kind of impact am I having? And am I making choices that are geared towards the kind of impact I'm trying to have? And so whatever your values are, so I mentioned our business before, our values are betterment, understanding, and support. Those are the values that guide our business. They are also my personal values. I have additional personal values. When I am making choices, when I'm encountering something that is difficult, when I'm worried about conflict or harm or anything along those lines, I am always filtering those choices through my values, because then when you have made your choices in the paradigm of the values you have, no matter how it lands, you can feel good about what you did.
Right.
Because there's so much we don't have control over.
Yeah.
And you have to, the way that you can cope with that is by knowing what your values are. And then my second bit of advice for all small business owners, but also for everyone, right? Because this is something I am encountering a lot right now, which is that there is what you want to happen, there is the world as you want it to be, and then there is the world as it is. And in order to get to the world as you want it to be, you have to be real practical about the world as it is.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think that when we are having conversations around DEI and other complicated big brain meta conversations, we are talking about the world as we want it to be.
That's right.
And I love that. I want that. But to get there, you got to be really honest about the world as it is and real grounded and practical about those things. And if you cannot have conversations that are grounded in the world as it is, if your learning and development isn't built around practical application in the workplace you have, the world you have, you are never going to get to what you want it to be. And that's true in terms of personal goals, workplace goals,
right.
business goals. That is a full spectrum truth right
covers
there.
everybody.
Yeah,
Everybody's covered.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes.
It
if
is.
your if your expectations and reality are so far apart and there's a gap,
Absolutely.
you need to be able to. It is.
Well, you'll
it's a-
just feel disappointed all the time.
Oh, God.
And that's like miserable.
Yes,
right?
yes,
Nobody wants
that's
that.
miserable.
Nobody
Yeah.
wants that. Yeah.
That's miserable. I can't believe that we are coming to time, which.
What?
I
We've
know.
been talking for an hour?
Yeah.
Oh, I could talk for 10 more. Let's
Oh,
go.
Maddie, you have to
So-
come back. Oh, my goodness.
So many. I just want to make sure that is there anything that you came on today and thought, I want to make sure we talk about this?
So many subjects. I have never casually engaged in a subject in my life. So actually, I want to talk about everything all the time. But I would say a couple of big things. First off, like I've used the phrase joy-centered a lot.
Yep.
I talk about that in play a lot. Joy is a good enough reason to do anything.
Absolutely.
Because you love something, because you feel excited about it, because you're into it, is a good enough reason.
Hmm.
You don't need to further justify. Also, on the flip side, a lack of joy is a good enough reason to stop doing things.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we get real stuck in the, well, this is how I've always done it, or this is just what my life is. And I want people, especially adults, because this is something that children do not struggle with, but I want adults to feel like their joy is worthy of prioritization in their life. Because it is. You deserve this as a human. And when you are leaning into your joy, you will find your people, you will find your purpose, you will get closer to the world as you want it to be. It is a good enough motivator to get you where you want to go. And it's okay to be excited about things. It's okay to do a little dance in the corner. You know, like it's okay to prioritize your own happiness, your own pleasure, your own joy as a guiding compass for your life. And it's okay to ask yourself tough questions about that too. And it's not always an easy road,
Right.
but I do want people to play with their life more. I want you to play more actively in your life, so the things that feel playful and engaging and like you lose time because you're so present and in it, I want that for people, but I also want people to ask them the sort of playful questions that will help guide you of, do I like this? Do I love this? What do I love? What are the things that make me feel energized and empowered and excited? And what are the things that make me feel not that? And how do I build a life that welcomes all of that energy and embraces it rather than just sort of trudges along? And I think, you know, sadly, a lot of people are sort of trudging.
It's true. I mean,
true.
when we lose joy, we lose so much.
Yeah.
And I always tell my kids and my grandkids, you only have one life.
Yes.
Please,
Like,
let's
this
live
is
it to
it.
the fullest. Enjoy what you
Yes.
do. Enjoy the little things. Enjoy the big things.
Yeah.
Ignore what doesn't serve you,
Yep.
and have joy in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's such a
Maddie,
beautiful
thank
word.
You so much. This was wonderful. This
Oh
was.
my God,
having
I,
me.
I
Maddie,
told her it was
you.
going to be good. This was.
She
fantastic.
did.
She's-
You know, and I like to take a step back because I know that she was talking so highly about you. Now I see why.
Thank you.
And I truly enjoy having you here. My
Yeah.
God, now I'm full of joy. It is contagious, people. It
good.
is contagious.
I think we also need to help her put together a small business training here
have
on the
to.
South Shore, Bristol County, Plymouth County.
Everywhere.
We'll find some small businesses.
There's so many places that I can bring you into. Please.
Yeah, no, we
Please.
need to put something
We
I
together.
mean,
need
I'm not going to
something
say
like
no.
that. No,
Okay,
of course
good,
not.
good.
But also,
Of course
this
not.
is what I'm saying is that like joyful connection will
Yes.
yield the other practical things in your life that you need.
Well,
Right.
we're going to give the shout out to Joanne Tully and
Yes,
South Shore
thank you,
Leadership,
Joanne.
Right? That was a joy.
Yeah,
it
it
was
was
a
a
joy
joy.
to do that cohort. It was a joy the people that we've met. It's been amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Well, folks, I hope that you will enjoy this episode as much as Lisa and I, and yes, I'm speaking for my co-host, Lisa and I have. Maddie has been Maddie. Thank you so, so much.
You're very welcome.
I have enjoyed every second of it. I don't think I have enough adjectives to describe how I feel at this moment. Here's my favorite quote. I want to leave you with my favorite quote. Let's continue to amplify diverse voices and foster meaningful dialogues. Until then, this is Maria. Thank you for listening.
And I'm Lisa. We're the Diversity Duo. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.